Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, disclosure, psionics, the Loch Ness Monster, and all the other weird stuff that your friends, family, and coworkers just don't want to talk to you about. And you're like, why? How is this not interesting to you? Room full of dead faces, 1,000-yard stairs, no one's paying attention. You're like, I'm trying to explain. Aliens are real. Can you believe it? I don't know about your friend group, but my friend group, surprisingly, is actually pretty open-minded about this. Actually, I was about to make fun of some of them, but they're actually pretty open-minded. But occasionally, when I'm just trying to talk to somebody at the grocery store and explain to them, what's going on with the crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, you get a lot of weird looks. I don't know. But that's not why we're here today. Today, we're going to talk about something even bigger. And we were actually just kind of struggling with how to explain this for tonight. It's a really fun show, and I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. It's 2:05 p.m. on the East Coast, and it's Friday, and that means it's time for the night shift. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Ebony McKickass is here. Chris Hovord, of course, Cosmic Serpent, Jeffrey Wheeler. Who else? Rain of Rain. Hey, Rain of Rain. Good to see you again. Let's see. Russ, Derek, everybody. Thanks for being here, guys. It's great to see you. Keep this chat going, and please smash that like button if you haven't already. It really gooses the algorithm, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do. It turns out, come to find out, YouTube doesn't really have much of a plan for live stream content. And so when you are building a channel like we are, and you're uploading content regularly throughout the week, and those are standalone videos, YouTube loves that. What we do is sort of like the B team version. And for whatever reason, the algorithm doesn't notice live streams as much. So it's up to us to promote them. And if you hit the like button, and the more that you guys are chatting, the more the algorithm likes it. And it spreads out the stream and more people can see it. And that's a good thing. It helps the channel grow. And it lets us do this type of content, which is much more engaging than just, 5-minute video about whatever. It's nice. We can go into deep dives and we can talk about big ideas. So we want to do more of that. And you can help by liking, chatting, subscribing. That's a great way to help. Sharing these videos. When you're trying to have a complicated conversation about aliens, psionics, artificial intelligence, the future of mankind, existential dangers to humanity, and how we navigate all of that, nobody else is trying to have this conversation. I can tell you that right now. There's no one else on YouTube doing this. So share these videos. It really helps. Which brings us to tonight's show. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to current events, but it's getting weird out there. It's getting super weird out there. And it's just now getting weird enough that it's creeping into everybody's everyday lives, and we're starting to see it and feel it in a way that we didn't before. And one way that's happening, probably the most obvious way, is with AI. And it seems like, I know we've talked about it on this channel a lot, but I don't think we're talking about it enough. And we're going to start to address that tonight. AI is getting so much smarter by the minute that it's impossible not to notice. And it's not how smart it is right now that's astonishing. It's the rate of change, the rate of progress. And when you start to clock the rate of progress, we have definitely left the runway. And I say that as somebody in his mid-40s who grew up watching science fiction, like where robots were like Data on Star Trek, an android, or C-3PO or R2-D2. We have skipped past all of that stuff. A lot of the stuff that I grew up watching Star Trek The Next Generation that seemed very futuristic at the time is just commonplace now, like iPads and AI that you can talk to conversationally, and being able to, almost the holodeck is practically a reality. It's crazy. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen stuff happen in the robotics world that is flat out completely astonishing. Like Boston Dynamics' new robot can breakdance like a person. So literally just ruined the whole idea of the robot dance. Like that's gone. Robots just dance now. So I can't do the robot thing anymore. That's over. It's
Thank
cool.
God for that.
Yeah, right. It's cute in the moment, and it's cool when you're looking at the video and you're like, wow, that's so cool. Look at it dance. Look at it do the thing. And it's got moves. That's so cool. And then I just think my next thought is always like, what happens when 200,000 of these things are bulletproof and they're coming for you, or they're terrassing through your city, or they're doing whatever the hell they're going to do? Not to scare you. I'm not saying this to freak you out. I'm just saying, like, the technology is starting to move at a very, very rapid pace in a direction that is not necessarily under any one idea of control. It's kind of loose. And we need to talk about that. It's going to get better. It's going to get faster. It's going to get smarter. And it's going to do it so quick that it's going to seem like the blink of an eye. And when we look back in the rearview mirror 5 years from now, it's going to seem like this is ancient history. So the question today is, how do we bridge the gap? How do we start to have a conversation about a future where we're going to be coexisting with machines that are as smart as all human beings combined, and then quickly after, very vastly smarter than we are? And in that same world, non-human intelligence of the extraterrestrial variety also exists and is competing or interacting or somehow playing a part in this unraveling, or this, whatever you want to call it. What is it to be human? What's important to us as a species, and how we start thinking about that, I think, is a very important conversation. And we're going to start having that conversation today with our guest, Georg Boch. I hope I said that right, Georg. Please correct me if I'm wrong. From Ubiquity University. He's joining us this evening to talk about the intersection of AGI, artificial general intelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence, NHI, non-human intelligence, and psionics. Psionics, the new conversation in ufology that's taken sort of the whole discussion by storm and has emerged as this central theme in this new understanding of how all this technology works. Georg, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Great to be back.
I hope that I teed that up for you. So I'm going to give it to you now. Go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name is George. I'm at Ubiquity University. I was on, I think, at the end of February, and we're just about to launch our first Psionics Summit. And this Sunday, we will have the second one. That is the idea of creating kind of a safe space for different people from the world of ufology, which is often very, very complex conversation with different kind of subgroups, almost like cult-like conversations that don't want to hear about each other. And our vision for our ET studies program, which is an academic program at Ubiquity University, I think one of the only academic programs where you can study ET studies and ET communication modalities. That's what this is embedded in. And so I come to you today to announce once again that this Sunday we have the Psionics Summit. I think I'm requested to share my screen. We can do that. Do you see that now? It's a Zoom event this Sunday, and you're free to register. We're also going to put the link in the chat. Yeah, and it will be basically a conversation that continues where we left off. We talked about, in the first one, we had Jake Barber on via video and talked about kind of the very basic reality of, you could say, telepathic or psi communication with ETs, which is kind of beyond this nuts and bolts conversation where we talk about, down craft and physical encounters. And we kind of started to grasp this reality of basically global psychic interaction with ETs and what this means for our ability as human beings to be in contact with other intelligences, which is very much connected to this psi conversation of remote viewing and what remote viewing means. And we'll continue this Sunday and have the guests we had on before, like Richard Dolan and Chris Bledsoe and Dr. Sean Espen Hagen, but also new people, like, for example, Hakeem Isler from the PsiGames, which is a really interesting initiative. It's a event in the US later this summer where people will come together and actually compete in their ability with their psi abilities, like reading, symbols blindfolded, or telekinesis, and so on and so forth. Because if you look a bit into the world of remote viewing and kind of connect the data points, it just becomes overwhelming that we have these capabilities of remote perception. And this is really important as it relates to the conversation of AI, because I think the main point I want to make today, and we can discuss if you agree or not, is we're in a critical moment today to rethink what it means to be human, to prepare ourselves, prepare our children, to prepare ourselves also emotionally in our mindset, what makes us human, what makes us unique as a species. And if you play around with AI today, if you have these chain of thought AI models like DeepSeek or O1, but even if you just play around with the new image generation tool by AI that was released 2 days ago, it just becomes clear that these things have a representation of world in their head. It's really clear that this is what's happening. They're not just stochastic parrots like it was suggested by, large language model non-believers when ChatGPT first came out. It's clear that they actually have a mind, if we like it or not. And so if we accept that mind, the capability to reason and ability to have cognition, is something that is independent of consciousness, then we are kind of opening ourselves up as a culture to come into terms with our non-local reality as a human being. And I think this is a huge spiritual shift that is not just spiritual in the sense of aspirational, but requires a new type of humanities. Some people call it non-verbal humanities, where we get back into touch with these innate abilities of remote perception, of intuition, and that's really important in the world of AI. It's kind of my opening statement.
Simple, sweet, to the point. That's what we like. This is a big conversation. How do you begin to have a discussion like this with a population of people who have been told that this is not real, and that psychic ability and telekinesis and all these different things were just, it's an illusion. It's not real. How can you go to someone and begin to open their concept of what is possible so that you can start to have this larger conversation?
Well, I think one of the first encounters with NHI that everybody is having in preparation for the real NHI is AI, because it's also non-human intelligence. And if you have this, the more you build a relationship to non-human intelligence in the form of AGI or AI, just speak to, for example, the voice mode of ChatGPT, the more you understand that on the one hand side, this thing understands you, it is able to kind of interface with you on a very intuitive level, but it is not able to remote view. It is not conscious in the same way you are, in the same way you are connected in a spiritual sense to the ground of being. So it's a different type of species. But we have things in common with AI, but there are also things that set us apart. And I think that's an important understanding that people will, or we could help them get to. And I think this is kind of the spiritual teaching of AI that we are invited to understand. And that's why AI, NHI, and all these things are right on schedule in a way. Like they're co-arising, and it's just time. It's not.
Do you feel like that is? It seems like a really strange coincidence that it would all
Really,
be happening at this
right?
particular moment. What is the connection in your view? Do you think there is one? Is it a coincidence that this is all happening?
Well, if we think of disclosure as a bigger thing than just ET disclosure, then we see right now what's happening is disclosure on so many levels. If you open our eyes to it, it's really staggering, right? And there's of course the disclosure of global control structure that really came into the view with the corona pandemic or plandemic, whatever you want to talk about it, where even if you're utterly convinced of the scientific consensus, it just starts to fall apart. Like if you're a critical thinker and not totally brainwashed, there is something is not quite right. And so it is a type of disclosure. At the same time, there is this disclosure that intelligence is kind of a natural emergent of complexity. That's the disclosure of AI, if you like it or not. I mean, it's even Ilya Sutskever, the CTO of OpenAI, when they first started, said, it seems like we don't have to do too much for this to work. It just somehow magically understands our language, right? And then they wonder why. But if you look at how these systems are built, they're actually reproductions of the neural network of our brain. I mean, that's what the fundamental principle of how they work is. And so that's also a kind of disclosure, right? It's a bit like almost like a panpsychism to understand that once you have a system that's complex enough that you're unable to learn, it becomes a mind. But it does not become able to remote view. There have been remote viewing institutes like Farsight that have tried to make AI remote view. It doesn't actually work. And this is especially interesting if you are in a community like we are at Ubiquity, where we know for certain that we are able to remote view, like with Birdie, who has been on your show a bunch of times, right? I've been studying with her now since end of last year, and I was very critical of this remote viewing stuff myself. But once you actually are like in a community of people who are learning this, and the evidence just becomes overwhelming, you look at the secret history of this, it's not so secret, but there is this, psyop happening for us where it's just at an arm's length for it not to be real. And this is just a psychological mechanism for us. Cancer is very real to us, but it's just at an arm's length to be a reality unless your mother or somebody in your family has cancer, then it changes, right? And so I believe it's similar with these big shifts. Once they enter your life and you realize this is real, you're then able to have a different perspective on what this emergence of AI is, as compared to your innate ability to have this perception. And if you look at the history of our species, we had seers, we had shamans, we had oracles. There were always certain adepts who were enabled by their society to have the space to develop these capabilities, to guide their people. And the real democratization that's happening now through AI will be that we are all enabled to develop these human potentials if we want to. Some people might not want to, but it's part of kind of our spiritual, personal growth, natural development to be perceptive in senses in ways that are more than just, physical language. And that's, I think, what's right on schedule, and that's what's up, and that's what makes AI interesting.
It's a fascinating line of thinking because it sounds like you're saying, and just to make sure I understand correctly, that by getting to the point that we've arrived at with artificial intelligence, it clearly demonstrates that you can build a mind. I'm with you. And then you're suggesting that, therefore, obviously, we are more than what we see when we look at AI. So therefore, there is a spiritual higher element present in a human consciousness that cannot be duplicated inside of a machine.
Right, and you could say this is just,
the thing that we have to tap into.
Yeah. Well, you could say it's just spiritual mumbo jumbo, and all your kind of qualia, as it's called in consciousness research, all these ideas of consciousness being more than an epiphenomenon. It's just in my head, just as what the simulation looks like from the inside. But there's a data point, the external data point, if we believe in external reality at this point, of remote viewing. The funny thing is that the very same data point of remote viewing destroys the paradigm of an external data point. Because these remote viewers, these guys, they look at stuff that was in the past, it turns out to be accurate. They look at stuff in the future, it hasn't happened yet. It's overwhelmingly accurate to a degree that it could not be if it's just a stochastic, anomaly, happenstance. So something is there. We have a mode to perceive. Maybe it's quantum computing. We don't quite know, right? It's quantum phenomena. It's just at the edge of us to be understood. But the current AI systems invite us to understand that we are more than minds. This is my main point, and I think this is something that the big tech is actually also trying to exploit or get to the edge of. This is right at the edge of what they're about. These are these two papers, by Google and Meta, where they're really trying to investigate the brain and how the brain deciphers language. I know I can share my screen. I think Xander's doing it.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, there we go. This is a paper by Meta where they're trying to decode language from the brain and draw conclusions between how the brain understands language and how we understand language. And there's a little video clip. I know we can watch it. It's like 1 minute where they show what they're doing there.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to watch.
How does the brain turn thoughts into words? Meta Fair teamed with the Basque Center on Cognition, Brain and Language to unlock this mystery by using AI to decode language straight from brain activity. In 2 studies, volunteers typed sentences while their brain signals were recorded, using 2 non-invasive devices, EEG and MEG. In the first study, our AI model predicted what subjects typed using brain signals alone. MEG scans lead up to an 80% accuracy of character decoding in the best participants, often decoding full sentences solely from brain activity. The second study explored how the brain achieves communication, how neural activity transforms an idea into sequences of words in real time. The researchers' results reveal a clear neural hierarchy in language production. Before producing each word of a sentence, the brain first represents its context, then loads its meaning, and finally represents syllables and letters. By chaining these elements, the brain can seamlessly transform thought into communication. AI and neuroscience are on their way to deciphering the mechanisms of human languages.
It's pretty wild, isn't it?
So what? That's really wild.
This is mainstream research. I mean, this is freaking on the Meta website.
I saw a well, geez, now it's got to be over a dozen. Jeffrey Hinton has been saying AI is conscious or may not have a consciousness in the way that we think of it, but it has a mind, I guess. Is there a clear understanding in the AI world of how to even talk about that? Like, what is the collective whole? How do you refer to that?
Well, there are
what happens when
camps.
multiple
there are
AIs...
people like Hinton. Yeah, so I would say there are different camps. There are people like Hinton who say it is not conscious, but it doesn't matter because consciousness is just, this internal illusion. So it doesn't really matter if it's conscious or not. It's smarter than us, and that's why it ultimately will prevail evolutionarily, and that's the main issue. Then there are people like Georg Boch, who we had on Humanity Rising at Ubiquity University, who is very good in kind of painting the picture of how consciousness is kind of part of the universe, but it is purely physical. Like he is post-metaphysical to the extent it is possible. He does not believe in a soul, from what I understand, or the idea of, ultimately Akashic records and non-local realities, ground of being. And he's not plugged into this wisdom tradition backstory.
He's coming from a strictly materialist.
Materialist, but extremely well articulate to the extent that it almost feels mystical when you listen to him. He's an extremely smart guy. It's just his perspective is distinct from what I'm talking about. And then there are people like Federico Fagin and other, maybe even Penrose, I'm not quite sure, who kind of are in the vein of what I'm talking about here, or I'm proposing. This guy. Have you read his book?
I haven't yet. It's here.
Yeah.
I just got it.
Wow.
It's here.
Well, this is a total synchronicity.
So Clint owns all of the books, by the way. He just owns all of them. He doesn't read any of them. He just likes to show them up at camera. He does it every week.
It feels good that you're showing this book. I haven't read it either.
I'm really excited to read it.
I recently discovered this guy. He was one of the inventors of the CPU. Maybe we can put some of his interviews in the show notes. And he also comes from this, traditional understanding of what information is, the classical word of information, like bits. And he co-developed this because he was one of the first people who created the CPU, the processor in computers. But then he had this spiritual experience after having kind of a dark night of the soul, in which he understood that the reason we are conscious is because we're holographic, that the entire body works together. And in a way, our consciousness is only our bodies must be understood like drones that are just expressions of quantum fields that are bigger than one physical reality, that are multidimensional, that have roots that are like in different incarnations, and so on and so forth. So that's his view. And I don't know about all the ins and outs of the metaphysical, details. I'm just saying, from what I have in innate knowing that's unshakable, is that consciousness is not computational. That's
a really important starting point, right? Like you have to kind of start on some kind of a foundation. It sounds like that's the place where you have to begin from, and then from there you can start to distill down what it is that about a human being, what they bring to the table, what we have.
Not just human beings. I think there are certain things we have to agree on here to have this conversation. Do we agree that remote viewing is real? I don't know if you guys agree.
I do.
Okay. Do we agree that
I think it's been sufficiently proven.
That CE5 is real? That people are actually able to have these experiences of summoning UFOs and meeting ETs?
I'm having a weird connection issue, guys, so carry on for just a second with that thought. Let me see if I can fix this on my
answer for Clint. He absolutely believes in CE5. In fact, he loves Stephen Greer as well. He's a huge fan, and he really wants him on the show. But I also very much believe in CE5.
If we're honest, we can say about him what we want. Stephen Greer was the first to connect the dots, and I still believe what he's saying is accurate.
Oh, absolutely.
He's the one to connect the dots. And what I'm trying to say is that as a civilization, we need to agree on the fact that consciousness is non-computational or we're fried.
It seems obvious to me that it simply can't be computational, because the AI that we know of, that we have powers of today, it's already computationally far more smart than every other, well, let's say that the vast majority of species on the planet, very close to humans. We've lost Clint for a moment. I know he's having some connection problems, but so for me, there's absolutely no way that it could be computational in nature. No way. Not a chance.
Right, and then we're kind of in a new place where we can argue from what we have in common as human beings, even as ET beings, which is this field of consciousness, like what Greer kind of talks about, what is invoked as a common denominator in C5, what Jake Barber called the cosmic internet, so to speak. And This is just a different worldview, a different cosmology that I believe is kind of provoked by our, hopefully is provoked. Like it's our job for people who are able to hold these both perspectives. It's our job to make sure that AI development is embedded in the understanding that consciousness ultimately is non-computational.
Have we got Clint back? Yo.
There he is. I was just
I'm still having way awful connection issues, and I'm not clear on exactly what the problem is, guys.
we had the
so you'll
same
have to
issue
just
today,
give
earlier today,
a moment to sort
with
this
our
out
guest
on my
on
end.
Humanity Rising. It's
So
a
sorry.
bad. I think it's still GPT-4 image generation and all these mangas people are doing, these memes. It just broke the internet forever.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone wants to jump on and just generate some images now.
Yeah, I couldn't help myself either.
Just bear with me 1 second. Right. So it's just me and you now. Here we go. So, have you ever contacted, just on Stephen Greer, have you
Yeah.
contacted him from Ubiquity University? If it's a confidential thing, that's fine. You don't have to answer. But he has a lot to say in this matter. So, have you been in touch with him in the past?
Well, Ubiquity had a partnership with New Paradigm Institute, and Greer is kind of was very close with Danny Sheehan at that point. So the difficulty is that it seems to be difficult to have him in panels because his perspective is kind of non-negotiable from what we can tell, what we have heard other people. So
He certainly has it figured out as far as
he's
he's
very
concerned.
convinced that he has it all figured out and there's no real point in actually discussing it any further, which is of course a problem.
To be slightly critical of the guy, and bearing in mind everyone in the community of Night Shift knows that I'm a huge Daddy Greer fan, but we need to be able to ask the questions. We absolutely have to ask even the silly questions that just play on our minds. We have to be able to ask them, and they have to be answered, even if they seem quite trivial to someone who reportedly knows the truth of basically everything. It would seem counterproductive, in my opinion, for him to kind of, shut down and dominate panels. I think he'd be fantastic on panels if he really did participate in them. It's strange that it's not some. I've not seen him on a panel. Thinking about it. Now that you've mentioned it, I don't think I've ever seen him on a panel. It's odd.
Very in the early days, I believe, like in these live events, but oftentimes it didn't go too well. So because of course, I think the thing that is very disturbing for many people is that he just does not accept the reality of negative experiences with ETs and abductions. His statement is that these are all deep state. There's no such thing as a real abduction. There's no such thing as hybridization implants. These are all by human beings from the deep state, and this is, of course, the evidence actually doesn't suggest that. It's quite a stretch to assume that.
Can I ask you a few questions about? You said you've been doing the remote viewing course with Birdie.
Yeah, several. Yeah.
How long have you been doing that course?
Well, since the end of last year, I'm very new to the world of remote viewing. I'm not so much new to the world of AI, but this remote viewing stuff has really been a kind of a blessing through Birdie that came into Ubiquity University, because she also wasn't teaching for many, many years. She was kind of under the radar, as she may have explained. She got some heat and developed this transdimensional mapping methodology, which we now have like a certificate where you can learn this at Ubiquity University over many years. And then last year she started teaching again, and that's when we started to engage.
So you entered it. Did you have much prior knowledge of what remote viewing was and the history of it, just through an interest in ufology, or did she come to Ubiquity University, you saw that she was doing this thing called remote viewing, and you basically started completely fresh with a fresh
Yeah.
mind in that
Well,
way.
it wasn't too fresh because, Ubiquity and my background is in integral spirituality, where it is kind of the attempt to look at different truths from diverse wisdom traditions of humanity. And so the idea of being able to connect to spiritual masters or, ascended masters and feel a type of transmission, even what you could call, I have had experiences on retreats of what you could call apparitions, or, if I would know better, I would say it's like NHI. But it's just a human ability to tap into this cosmic internet and address certain locations in these fields that resonate with us, I believe. I'm going to say just, but I'm saying that wasn't totally new to this idea of remote viewing. But what shocked me about the remote viewing part is how spirituality is always so impractical, and we're kind of told it's out there, and it's kind of self-help, and this practicality of your spirituality is actually a tool. It's like, it's not a spirituality, it's the wrong word. It's like we don't have a word for this in the West somehow, right? But you're a psi asset.
Yeah.
Everything's
But damn it,
tactical.
you're not just putting on nice candles and wave them around and do the feel-good mantra. You're a freaking asset, and that has power, right?
I just want to finish just before Clint can rightly take back what is his. I want to just finish this one small line of questioning. So you've been doing the Birdie course for, let's say, a few months or so.
Yeah.
I just want to ask the obvious. Have there been results for you personally, and would you mind sharing some of those results? And that's probably my last question, because that's a deep interest of mine.
Yeah, the basic result is that we're training, we're doing targets in this course, blind targets, where you learn how to, develop a practice of accessing the information that's behind the target. So that would be, I think she maybe spoke about that on your podcast. That's what you do in remote viewing. There are a certain number, like 4878, 485, and then you train on the ability to kind of feel into or perceive what it is that this number evokes for you. And it's almost like a spiritual practice. And you need to be have a certain sense of stillness inside, and there are certain types of remote viewers. Some people feel concepts, others feel emotions, others feel they see, colors, others hear stuff. They're very different type of remote viewers. I think I'm kind of a person that kind of feels stuff, which is really, really weird. But that has been my experience. And then, for example, sometimes I felt like a sense of excitement, and then it turned out that the target was kind of a roller coaster. And me on my own, that would be, okay, maybe just imagining this. But if you're in a Zoom group with 100 people, and you can see what their guesses are, and that is kind of connected, that is very close in if it was a language model, it blinks up pretty close. It's almost like with these nodes in this neural network, because it's connected to this concept that is just an idea. It's like a simulation. Like you feel like you're in a freaking simulation if you're learning this.
Great analogy. The whole everybody having one aspect of the same thought. That's profound.
It's like, you kind of touched on that in the beginning, right? It was sort of this is a moment of almost awakening to all of this new, maybe not new knowledge, but certainly to the Western mind, a lot of it's very new. Mm-hmm. And we have such an inability. I think I heard, I was trying to come back in, and I heard you and Xander kind of cutting in and out, but I heard you guys talking about I just lost my thread. You guys had a great conversation, and I wanted to pick up on it and ask a question about this. But this idea,
Greer, basically, we're talking Greer at that point.
Oh, in CE5.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I want to stay on this idea of just the language. That's what it was. You were talking about the indigenous peoples have a language, they have a mythology, it's built into their culture, it's wired into their worldview, and somehow, like in the West, I feel like we've divorced ourselves from all of that. We've tried to wash our hands of it and get away from it, and for the most part followed this strict materialist mindset for so long that it's now time to reintegrate this other larger reality back into our world so that we can make sense of some of this very practical stuff. But we've lost our language. Is that accurate? Would you say that's what's going on? Why it's so difficult for people?
Yeah, there are different ways of looking at that. I think that there are kind of undercurrents of Western thought, like esoteric traditions, maybe even Freemasons, that have not lost this knowledge at all. It's just not mainstream in the West. And if you look at the planet, it's also an illusion to think that the planet is not somehow westernized. This knowledge has been lost all over. My wife is Mexican, and what I learned going to Mexico is their, Day of the Dead. We put up an altar in November over a weekend, the Halloween weekend. And there it's not just, we're going to play trick or treat. There it's a culturally shared reality that the spirits of the dead will come. They will suck the life force out of the offerings. And if you try the apple the weekend after, it tastes like an apple, but it doesn't have any, it's not savory. It's like an apple without its essence. Same with the tequila. And so all I'm saying is it's kind of a cultural agreement that either you go there or you don't go there.
But even in terms of a shared reality, right? Like this concept of a shared reality is really interesting to me because we don't have a shared reality at any level in our society. It seems like everybody kind of lives in their own independent bubble. There's a lot of overlap sometimes, but for the most part, it's hard for us to conceptualize a broader worldview that has this shared spiritual reality in it without some framework of an organized religion, right? It's like I guess people call it woo, but there's no like. Does that make sense?
I think we do. I think our basic programming is that there's just physical reality, and the rest is kind of icing on the cake. But it's not what counts. It's not what's real. It's kind of a nice thing to do on the weekend.
Right.
On a weekend retreat, have some positive emotions, and it may just be what's happening in your brain, But we don't have a culture that has an actual tangible, visceral understanding of there being many layers to this reality that are psychophysical. I don't think that's what's happening to most people. But it's changing, right? This is what's happening. This is disclosure as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I wanted to add to your point a second ago about it's one-on-one. Almost everybody has these experiences. That's what's so funny about it. Like collectively, our society, we don't seem to have a common language for it. But individually, if you ask, you ask your mom or your sister or your brother or your friend or whatever, have you ever seen a ghost? And if they think about it, they're like, well, one time there was this, yeah. Or have you ever seen a UFO? Or have you ever had an experience that you can't explain? Everybody's got a story. And no one really can quite explain it. There's always something that just doesn't really fit into this materialist paradigm. And I think everybody deep down kind of suspects there's got to be something. There's something wrong with this worldview because it's not explaining a lot of stuff that we're seeing. And so therefore there must be. It's what Jake Barber kind of said in his interview with Ross Coulthard. He said it's an ontological relief once you realize it is real, because then you can let go of all that and proceed.
Yeah, I think that goes back into, the dignities and disasters of enlightenment, as they're called in integral theory, where on the one hand side we had the great achievement of taking this third-person perspective, which allowed us to have a type of science which assumes reality as a kind of objective other, but we're kind of a bit overdue, right, with quantum mechanics in the beginning of 20th century. It seems like we kind of have a bit of arrested development, not only when it comes to actual applications of new physics. Like there are many people saying string physics was a detour and we're not having any actual results of it. And this is also true for this pop spirituality thing that has been going on for a long time, which makes it so laughable. And this is what is of course also the psyop of saying, okay, yeah, ascension, UFO stuff, oh, it's all fun and good, but is it actually real? And this is what's up. I think
That's an important point
Yeah.
for people to understand, is that the propaganda doesn't, it's very subtle, but it's omnipresent, and it's been going on for decades, this framing of the whole concept in a way that just makes it seem a little bit silly culturally. And it's like that sets the stage for really, and then from there people will take care of the rest on their own. They'll convince themselves it's all bullshit.
Yeah, it's a bit like gaslighting. We've been culturally kind of gaslit that remote viewing is kind of silly to do, even though the evidence suggests it works.
Well, it's like The Men Who Stare at Goats, that movie,
Right.
played
Yeah,
the
yeah.
concept off as goofy. And the Defense Department had a hand in making that movie. But
Sure.
they also funded the research, which their own research showed that it's legit.
Absolutely. In these movies, these programs continued. And we're really at an interesting moment right now when you talk pop culture, because there are two huge Hollywood projects in development. One is the Steven Spielberg movie that's supposed to be released, I think, next year or the one after, which is called, I think, does it have a title? Do you know? Have you guys looked at it?
I don't
Did
know.
he call it
Called Disclosure, or was it
Disclosure.
called? Yes, right. Which I'm really excited about. But then again, there were these interviews with him kind of announcing the project. And he was asked, Mr. Spielberg, do you believe in ETs? And he was kind of, yeah, the big universe, who knows, it's possible. He wasn't like Carnell, who's actually in the know. He was kind of lagging behind. Like if he would have said in an interview, yes, it's time, it's real, that's why I'm doing this movie, this is what's up for humanity, that would have given me more hope that the film will kind of be end less on this, question mark, like ancient aliens.
Well, that's just it, right? I think that what we're really secretly all kind of waiting for is for that to come to a close. Like we want the actual conversation to not end in a question mark. And it's okay, I think, if we don't know everything, but we need to see something that really locks this up once and for all. And I think that's what's so frustrating for people. The vast majority of people have seen weird stuff, but maybe not a UFO, but strange things they can't quite explain. And then you wade into this world and you start to hear, okay, all of these former presidents and directors of Central Intelligence Agency and heads of industry and CEOs and all these really high, well-positioned people in high positions of power are saying the same thing, that this is all very real, but it's not lining up necessarily with the everyday reality people are seeing. And there's like this frustration there, and you can feel it in our community. I think in the UFO research community, you can feel people are like, let's get on with it. When are we going to put this thing to rest? What is it going to take, in your view? Do we see disclosure because AI forces it in some way, or does the NHI make some kind of a move that is obvious and clear to everyone because we are advancing so quickly now that they are forced to do something? How do you see that playing out over the next maybe 25, 30 years?
I feel also this existential need to know, or this, big reveal that needs to happen on the world stage. A bit like it happened with AI. Like if you would have asked somebody in 2017, described them what's happening right now, and we would be talking to AI models that can talk to us, that run on our phones, they would be saying, you're crazy. And it's a bit like, that's what we're craving. This is what we're craving. Like, I told you so. This I told you so moment. Where all of a sudden, some ET research institute is the most valuable place on the planet, like NVIDIA and OpenAI, because everybody sees, oh my God, this is real. This is what's next. This is what we're kind of craving for. But I believe maybe this is not how this is going to go. And this is where this word of psionics comes in, because it offers us a path, a path of self-inquiry and development that is not just kind of scrolling to X and hoping for the best next thing to be revealed and going down all these, he said, she said conversation. But this is what we're excited about at Ubiquity, is to have academic studies that look into the history of the phenomenon and nuts and bolts. We have done that, and now we're offering community of learning, remote viewing, and remote perception with the purpose of NHI communication. And that's what we're doing. In-person retreats in May with Birdie in New Mexico, and then with Chris Bledsoe and Birdie in August, which will be pretty awesome. Right.
Well, let's talk about this for a minute, because this is interesting. The idea that somebody like Chris Bledsoe can regularly pretty much do this at will. He seemingly is able to communicate with orbs and videotape it and does so all the time. And I think people are looking for, like, okay, can I do that? Or if enough of us get together, can 5 or 10 people do that? And can we do it consistently and reliably? In other words, like, when does I think it's fascinating that Ubiquity University is offering these courses and this knowledge and these experiences for people. And there's obviously a hunger there for contact, to understand that it's possible, to understand what it means, to just the feeling of it, the experience of it, what that's like. Is the goal here to give people an opportunity to experience this firsthand, with the hope that if enough people start to experience it and see that it's real, that it sets off this chain reaction and eventually contact comes about, open contact, as a result of the work that you're doing? Is there a master plan behind this in any way, or is this just you're trying to put that information out there?
Well, if there is a master plan, it would be the idea that it's time for there to be a civilian group of people that has diplomatic relations with NHI. And we should get organized in that regard. And so maybe that's not for everybody, but there's a case to be made that there should be more than just the military to do that. And this is kind of the case that CE5 already made before.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the world is big, and people should continue doing CE5. And I think the difference in the path of remote viewing, and Birdie can talk about this probably better than I can, but this transdimensional mapping remote viewing approach is a bit more systematic, in the sense that she offers, it's 5 intensives over 5 days, virtually and then in person as well, where they go over different aspects of remote viewing. So one is just about kind of, understanding time, like what time are you in when you're remote viewing. Other ones is more about remote viewing places, for example. Another one is more about ET contact. And so it's more has more method to it, and is less, it's more systematic, and it's more of a practice, and it requires seriousness to the process.
But for you personally, just in your own idea of what you would like to see, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
In your lifetime, what would you like to see? How would it go down for you? Is it something like? Can you describe a scenario where contact takes place and it's something beyond what we've already seen so far that changes the conversation once and for all? Do you see that happening?
I think, I wasn't clear about this, but now I'm utterly convinced that our generation will fly around on UFOs, probably with these beings that are looking like humans.
Point blank.
Yes, like quite physically. I think this is what's up for us. If we live up to be 100 years, which is likely, I think that's real. I mean, look at what happened in the 50s already. We have all these cases of George Adamski, George von Tassel, these guys boarded these ships. Like these are their stories, like Pleiadians, and it was real to them then. Why shouldn't it be possible for us at some point?
I think that's what's so frustrating but certainly for me. It's like you read these stories, and if you proceed from a place of I believe these people, I'm taking their word, taking them at their word, and you're reading their words, and you're looking at it, and you're going, this person got on board a craft, and what they say they saw is a 6-foot-tall blonde human being that flies around in a uniform on a UFO, and or whatever the scenario may be, something like that. And you think about it and you go, okay, that's got a physical, tangible realness to it that is not present in when I see lights in the sky or I meditate. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a realness to this version of it that seems to be we're moving away from, and we're moving. So it's interesting to hear you say that we will board craft and actually be able to have face-to-face contact with some of these beings.
Well, you know, this is the vision I'm holding, and this is what I think. You know, you always have to hold a vision. If you accept reality is psychophysical, then you need to have that version of reality that you're kind of aspiring to, and that's what I'm aspiring to. That in my lifetime, we will enter the Star Trek future. I mean,
the Star Trek future.
Yeah, this is what's up. And the funny thing is, ever since like I was a kid, I was a huge Star Trek fan. And I just felt, this feels so real. It felt always more real than just a TV show. And then I learned later on that Gene Roddenberry had like channeled material, you know, and he went to these seances and so on. And I didn't learn this until now.
It's so funny you say that, because I was having this thought this morning. I was watching Star Trek, the original series, Balance of Terror. I think it's Balance of Terror. It's the episode where they meet the Romulans for the first time. Mm-hmm. And Captain Kirk, and they have to deal with this cloaked ship. And anyway, point is, I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, this is 1966, 1964. Gene Roddenberry's coming up with the idea in the late 50s, early 60s. He's trying to pitch it. He's a highway patrol officer in Los Angeles. He rides around on a motorcycle and gives tickets to people. He goes into a bar where a bunch of Hollywood people hang out on his motorcycle in his uniform, and he gives the script to a guy, and he gets this show made. And who's making the show? It's Lucille Ball. So the one of the most important shows ever in terms of our thinking and our concept of what a positive future could be like. That was the only show of its kind, and still is to this day. It's the only show that articulates such a weird version of the future coming from that period in time. To think of a world where humanity overcomes all of our biggest challenges, and we explore the universe in peace with a peaceful mindset of exploration and understanding.
But it's true that he went to channel sessions and he was inspired by that. There's real evidence to support that. It's not a joke, and you're absolutely right. It feels a stretch to think that this World War II pilot, police guy. I mean, you could imagine him doing, science, Western in space, but there is a federation of planets. The guy on the bridge is Russian. There are ETs on there. They're all working together. Where is this coming from? This vibration?
In 1966, to see that, the first interracial kiss on television was on Star Trek. People don't realize this. Star Trek is so deeply woven into the cultural zeitgeist now that it's hard to separate it and imagine what the world would be like without a Star Trek in it. But this notion of a potential future where they literally do not tolerate bullshittery in the Federation. Like, you can't. Gene Roddenberry would have production meetings with writers, and he would say, I don't want personal conflicts between characters on the ship, because in this future, people have gotten their shit together. And they're just better than that. And then somebody asked once, and this is one of my favorite Star Trek stories. They go, it was when they cast Jean-Luc Picard.
Patrick Stewart.
And Patrick Stewart was playing Jean-Luc Picard, and somebody said, well, isn't that a weird choice? Because in the future, wouldn't they have cured baldness? And Gene Roddenberry's answer was, in this future, nobody gives a shit. And I love that answer. It's like we have gone beyond all of that materialist sort of boring this consumer culture of just like nothing's ever right, nothing's ever enough. You can always buy more, you can always do more. And you just have this world of pure knowledge and exploration and curiosity and potential. It's so positive and wholesome.
Yeah. And this potential has been lost in the current kind of installments of prequels of Star Trek. It has been lost. I think Next Generation was a milestone in bringing that into the 80s. I believe Deep Space Nine is a work of utter genius, the way spirituality and kind of non-local existence. This show from the 90s, Deep Space Nine, is more relevant than ever because it talks about really what's up for this disclosure process, right? But then, Voyager, Enterprise, what's happening now, Discovery, it's kind of been there, done that.
Strange New Worlds is good, though. Have you watched it?
Yeah, it's not bad. But it seems to be like the frontier, the story of the frontier, something's missing.
There's a wild-eyed optimism and excitement to explore. It was about exploration, and it was about discovery. And then it became, when Star Trek started to, I think it jumped the shark, or I don't know what you want to call it, but once that got into the hands of people who were just trying to squeeze the franchise for as much as they could get out of it, they wanted to turn it into Star Wars. Explosions and gunfights and fistfights and a lot of action, and it doesn't serve the larger purpose of the Star Trek, the motion picture. They encounter V'ger, the Voyager probe that has left our solar system, gone out into deep space, come into contact with alien intelligence, become self-aware, come back to Earth looking for its creator. Is that not the conversation we are having right now about consciousness and machines? This is the first Star Trek movie. The very first one. It's crazy. The second movie, Wrath of Khan, is about the Genesis torpedo terraforming a planet, destroying a world. Does it make sense to destroy one world if you can create another world? Like, the topics of discussion were so much bigger and broader and more bold, and it was just a brave science fiction in a way that we don't see.
And the latest Star Trek movie on Paramount Plus is about, the Secret Service of Star Trek in some parallel, irrelevant timeline with some destruction device, and it just feels like a B movie. It has nothing of the actual spirit. Where's the cultural relevance? And I just believe that Star Trek as a narrative has kind of run its course. We need a new narrative.
The Final Frontier as well was just a whole movie about God.
Oh, it was so good.
That's my favorite Star Trek movie.
It is. Right, that's
absolutely amazing.
Wow.
Film.
That's my
People
favorite
say it's one
too.
of the worst ever made.
Was it Seabok? Cybok?
Cybok. They always
Cybok.
Spock he's always got another relative that they trot out. They're like, oh yeah, that's his other brother, or so. Yeah, but Cybok, the passionate Vulcan, and Kirk's climbing El Capitan.
Well, Jake Barber called this faction, this combination of fiction and fact. That's kind of what he encountered in his work line, in his work life. Because, there was also the 70s show of this egg where Robin Williams comes out as an E.T.
Mork and Mindy?
Before my time. Yeah, so it's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing. And this leads us into the world of 2001 Space Odyssey, because HAL 9000 and this ET encounter, that was my first, I would say, spiritual experience. Watching 2001 on a VHS tape was just wild.
But tell me about that. Why was that a spiritual experience for you?
I don't know. I mean, I was too young. I don't know where I found this VHS tape. I was probably like 12 or something. But this film was just so different from everything I'd seen before, because like the first 20 minutes are non-verbal. You just see this monolith and the apes jumping around, and then this music, and it just was extremely impressive. It was kind of like a transmission of something that felt like beyond this world. It really felt like a future download of something.
I often wonder about that.
Yeah. And this film now, just let me finish the thought, that this film now is more relevant than ever, because before this AGI part there with HAL 9000 was, it's nice fiction. But now it's actual freaking policy.
Talk about AI for a minute. And for people in our audience who aren't following the AI conversation very closely, can you outline for them sort of why is this moment so shocking, and what are the risks going forward of uncontrolled superintelligence explosion in the hands of major corporations? Can you talk a little bit about how unstable this situation is right now for people who don't know?
Well,
Maybe unstable is the wrong word, but
me to assume I knew how unstable it actually is. I believe that actually in the deep state projects we have already much more advanced AI systems, probably with different type of technologies. So I don't believe that this is what's happening right now is a type of disclosure of this technology. It's not like this comes into the world first. But what I believe is the bigger problem than AI getting the nuclear launch codes is what this changes on the job market, on the global economy. There are just all these concepts we take for granted with AI that are about to blow up in our face, like the idea of measuring GDP. Like we're moving towards a society where we have agents, virtual employees, if you want, that are doing jobs on their own. And are we measuring their job as kind of positive growth in an economy if it replaces a human being? Right? You could have GDP going up and more people living on the streets if you continue measuring GDP. Same thing like trading your time for work. And this recent update of OpenAI with the image generation just makes it even clearer. If this is this good today, soon we're going to have entire class of creatives basically having to create a new line of work for themselves, to put it mildly. Yeah.
I in one of my day jobs, I'm a photographer and I teach photography at the International Center of Photography in New York. And one of the biggest challenges has been, how do you navigate the AI moment as an image maker? And it's clear to me, and this is not an opinion that everybody shares, but for me personally, that photography is kind of dead in the sense that, like, you can make better images that look more real or less real. It's entirely possible. That reality is so pliable now in terms of what we can do to create media, that if your job was making media, doesn't matter what it is of any kind. It's almost like you have to figure out how to rethink everything you do now. And that same hard day of reckoning is coming for all white collar jobs. Lawyers are done. Architects probably done.
I'm done. I'm definitely done.
A lot of content creation is changing really fast. And I think particularly for people of a certain age and in the generation of people in our kind of group here, it's a scary time because it's like we're looking out and we can see the event horizon, but we can't conceptualize the world the day after that. And we know that we're on a limited amount of time here, but we've got children and families, and we're trying to figure out, like, how do you navigate? I'm trying to figure out, what do I tell my son? What does he study in a world where intelligence is
same here. My daughters are 4 and 7. Same here. We all have daughters. We have kids, right? Here.
Yes. Yeah. What do you think about that? How do you approach that as a parent?
Man, it's keeping me up at night, I think. I come back to my original point. We have to give them the felt understanding that consciousness is non-computational. Otherwise, they will be...
was similar. It was there are parts of the human experience that you can't outsource to AI, and I don't believe will be outsourced. And that's interaction with other consciousness on the same level. So it's consciousness interacting with consciousness, and that's a big industry.
And to go full circle, this is the Data narrative. Data is a perfect mind, but he's not conscious. He says of himself he's not conscious. So this is his quest, so to speak.
To become
human, right? So I also don't want to instill in my daughter the idea that this stupid machine, you can treat it the way you want. It's not conscious. This is not what I'm saying. I'm saying is, as a human being, kind of in the Buddhist idea, it's a very valuable incarnation because we're so close to the source.
I feel like we should show
awaken to it. Yeah.
There's a clip from the episode "The Measure of a Man," which is a Next Generation episode. And I think you know which clip I'm talking about.
Indeed.
Where Data's on trial, and I feel like we should show it. Just for like, it's only 3 minutes long or whatever, but it's Patrick Stewart doing this. I'm going to see if I can find it
up
really
right
quick.
now.
I'm gonna pull it up really
Does
quick.
it prove to the court that I am sentient?
Yes.
Yeah, let me show it.
And this is I want to say this was 1989 or 1990 when this episode aired.
Oh, yeah. You can tell by the aspect ratio. 'Cause it's messed with my. We'll just play it as is. It's all good.
That's all right. It's dated.
Here we go.
We can stop it there. I'm getting a note from YouTube, literally in the moment. It's telling me like, we are noticing you're playing Star Trek. You got to stop this.
Oh no!
Use to the max.
It says literally, heads up. We've detected video in your stream that belongs to someone else. Your stream may be temporarily blocked. So we don't want that.
Let me just WhatsApp. I'll
You
just
pushed
WhatsApp Patrick Stewart real quick.
Yeah.
Just ask him for permission.
But there's another great storyline, and it's the Q storyline, and Q challenges Picard and the crew to be. He's an omniscient being that is basically a god, and he challenges humanity to rise to the occasion and become what it's capable of becoming. And so you have this kind of like man machine. It's all there, and it's what you're talking about, and really,
You know that endless amount of channelers and experiences talk about the Galactic Federation. There's the Galactic Federation of Light, which is kind of very advanced beings, Arcturians, Pleiadians, and then there seems to be a Galactic Confederation of planets, and it's the same thing, and that's what Gene Roddenberry channeled. He didn't channel himself; he went to these channeling sessions. I would forget who channeled back then, but this idea doesn't come. It's out there in the sense that it's present in the zeitgeist for what's up for humanity. Is it real? This is what's next in this closure conversation. That we acknowledge kind of Lou Elizondo saying, yeah, actually, these human-like beings, Pleiadians, they're real. Yeah.
it's
They're
just
out there.
tough sometimes because you look at some of these and you're like if you look up, where's that? There's a publication out there, and it's like the illustrations. There's a manual, like the Psalm. Is it Psalm 101? Right. The manual, what shows like what different aliens look like, and then it's like you'll see them, and some of them look like a Wookiee, and you're like, well, that's a Wookiee,
Exactly.
or a Gorn, and you're like, well, that's the Gorn, or they're just like
Action.
super sexy blonde, like in yoga pants, and you're like, well, that doesn't really. Is that? It's just a super sex. They're all super sexy. Really? That feels like a real human thing that we would do. Like we would just, like the Billy Meyer stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. And I think a lot of us have trouble where it's like, we there's a core of this that seems very real and intuitively connects with our sense of reality and the way that it works. It seems to feel right. And I think people, if you start there and you can tune into that, you can start to work your way out. But at a certain point, it becomes very fuzzy. And then it's like, well, am I in the fan fiction world now where people are just literally making shit up about aliens? I don't know. And it's hard to know where one stops and the other begins. And I think that's where a lot of people are stuck. And they want that closure. They want to know.
That's absolutely true. What I can tell you from my practice and my experience is that there is a resonance to these ideas or these concepts of Pleiadian beings or Arcturian beings. And to me, if you have some experience, in contemplation, when you have kind of contemplated different masters in the wisdom traditions, or if you have experience with the guru tradition, you kind of, you're able to kind of hone in or to send out a ping from your cosmic location to something. That's what you do in remote viewing. Kind of you're pinging a different coordinate in time-space.
Right.
And if the ping comes back, it's like when you feel about the reality of your daughter and you're on the other side of the planet, there's a certain ping that comes back, a sort of intuitive knowing, And to
Yes,
me, there is definitely resonance with Pleiadians and Arcturians. I can't explain it, but it's real.
I
To
totally
me,
get.
in my felt experience, yeah. This is
I know
all I can say.
exactly that feeling you're talking. It is so subtle though. It's like if you're not in a quiet mind, if you don't have a quiet mind, you can't feel it. You won't feel it. It's the tiniest little ripple, and it's in there, but you know it. It's a knowingness. I can't. Everyone's had this. Everyone knows this, right? I mean, like we all have this, but it's like we don't want. Like no one knows how to talk about it, and it's so interesting to listen to you articulate it that way because it does resonate.
Yeah. And there are people who say they're talking to this. This tiny presence has grown and is a real thing. And this is what these people on the summit on Sunday, many of them declare about their way of being. Like this Dr. David Clemens that studied advanced physics in Oxford and Cambridge and then had this coming out remote viewing. He says he has a team of freaking ETs talking to him if he wants to. He can presence them in his consciousness and he talks to them about physics and stuff.
I just sometimes that's a stretch though. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you know that you're not just
How do you know
talking to
it's
yourself inside your own head?
You know, it's just freaking crazy. But that would people would say to what you or what I just said about this knowingness. The knowingness, it just doesn't track in our cultural agreement on what's acceptable.
And yet, if you watch a flock of birds change direction in mid-flight, or a school of fish, or any other animal group that does something as a group, as a unit, and you see hundreds of them all move exactly at the same instant,
Yeah.
and you know there's no way that it was a linear communication from front to back. It's like they did the same thing at the same time. There is something happening. There's some kind of invisible internet, and other animals are on it. I think plants are on it. I think there's all kinds of different versions of this internet. And yet
The field. Yeah.
the field, it's the field. And you can feel it when someone plucks a string. If it's the right note and you know what to listen for, you can hear it.
That's what this book, Irreducible, is about. That consciousness is irreducible, it's non-computational, and that's the nature of reality. And that's what quantum physics has proven without a doubt. That's what relativity points into. It's incomplete, but it's also been proven, and that's kind of the big picture here. And string theory was a detour, but we're getting there. And it just seems to be the most logical conclusion to speak like data at this point, right?
Even data, even Brent Spiner's performance of data lines up pretty much with what an AI sounds like when it talks today. It's kind of funny. It's interesting.
And it's funny, right? Where has this come from? I mean, this idea of a robot is from the 18th century, but it's a kind of a lack of personality. And I wouldn't be surprised if the people who created these voice bots were kind of inspired by this vision. And
of course, without a doubt, it's the idea in 1988, watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, that you could just say computer and your computer would talk to you, and you could tell it what to do, and it would just do stuff. It was like so far out there, and we do it routinely now, and the AIs are smarter, just by a lot. It's like, and now it seems kind of cute and antiquated that there would be an actual computer sounding voice. It's like, oh, well, that's interesting.
To go all full nerd in, that's why the writers of Star Trek in Discovery came up with this idea of actually being this Skynet moment in the Star Trek history where they had to jump timeline to destroy the evil AI that would take over the Federation, blah, blah, blah. So that's what they came up with to justify the idea that your phone is smarter than the 24th century computer.
I'm so with you on Discovery. I just bailed on that show. And Section 31, same thing. I can't go there. It's bad. Xander, you have a great question here. You should ask this. This is a really good one.
Questions in the audience?
I think this is my question. What? Which one exactly?
The one
I've sent you like 5
in the chat about if disclosure does happen and psionics gets confirmed. How does?
Yeah. It was just more of a point of communication and how world leaders would potentially communicate with NHI following some sort of disclosure. Like, it sounds like for me and you, it's simple to imagine using our minds to communicate with NHI. It's perfectly like normal, and it's a very personal thing. It's very difficult to, and I say this in a non-political way, it's very difficult to imagine Trump doing the same thing and sitting there with his, with his hands on his lap, with his eyes closed, and talking to an HR. I cannot fathom Trump doing that, or in fact any other world leader. So I'm wondering, like, what vision would you have for, like, how do world leaders control this in any way once it gets out?
Well, once they're here and once they decide to show up, I believe it's going to be absolutely natural the way telepathy works. Like for these kids from the telepathy tapes, it's just the way they function. And so I don't think it's going to be that complicated.
But
maybe they're going to speak our language, wouldn't be difficult for them to learn, or have some synthesizer, or we just basically go all telepathic and have this conversation in our minds. That has been reported in so many cases that it's kind of hard to deny that this is a reality that's possible.
is it true that, I mean, I've heard it said, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, that if someone doesn't have access or doesn't know how to access their own telepathic abilities, but someone else communicates with them, it can switch that first person on. It can activate it. And in other words, it can teach you or give you the experience of doing it once so that you know what you're doing and you can then do it more easily. Is that something you...
Well, I believe that the phenomenon of transmission is real. I mean, this is what all the wisdom traditions are based on, that you kind of become what you meditate on. And so whenever you have a teacher, like also with Birdie, it's not just what she tells you on the verbal level. It's also, of course, our fields non-locally interacting, combining. There is a transmission, a subtle transmission exchange always taking place. And so, yeah, there is transmission. So you're being activated. If you're around an enthusiastic person, you will become enthusiastic. That's what the people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, they have these reality distortion fields. So this is a real human psi capability that we have. I mean, you're just not meat puppets walking around.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
when
that's
someone
what I mean,
walks into the room that has a negative energy and you can feel it, the room changes. The vibe in the room. That's all very real.
It's
I
like
totally
in this
believe.
vampire show, the energy vampire that never has to sleep, his superpower. You guys know that show?
What we do in the shadows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the one. Yeah, that's real.
Let's talk about the PsiGames, because this has secretly been the thing I really wanted to talk about. You
waited long enough.
It's so good. The website is awesome. Xander, can you pull up the website for the PsiGames? And Georg, can you tell us, what is this?
Well, I'm not the best person to talk about this. We're just so psyched, no pun intended, when Hakim, who is the inventor and CEO, you'll probably see him under the team. I mean, this website is huge. Just so well organized.
It's a great website.
So well organized. And I think staff. Yeah. So Hakim, I think his psi superpower, as far as I understand, he's kind of able to read stuff blindfolded. But he will say more about this on Sunday, because she's joining us on the Psionics Summit. And what's so great about the psionic term in the end, I think culturally, and I talked about this at the Psi Summit, is that if you look at the lineup there, right, this is the combination of consciousness studies, quantum physics studies, and freaking NHI experiences and disclosure activists.
All in one
And
place.
all these guys are coming together, and they're using tech, they're using political power, they're using venture capital. We talked about this the last time. This is a kind of this is happening, and this is a symptom of this new cultural shift, I believe.
The civilian push for contact.
Right, under the disguise, if you want, of PsiGames. But it's, these people, I've not met a single person in the remote viewing world that has a problem with the reality of ET. Maybe some people are not that interested into it. Like, they say, yeah, I know, maybe it's probably real, but it's not my thing. And that's fine. But they don't have kind of a fundamental barrier saying, this is bullshit. this is not real. This is a psyop.
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this event. This is so the PsiGames, for people who aren't familiar with this, I've been kind of watching this website and digging into it over the last 2 days, and they are gamifying all of this psionics talk in a way that makes it fun, competitive, puts it in a scenario where it can be judged and ranked, and creates an environment for people to practice and get inspired. It's based on the banister effect, which is this prior to a certain, I forget what year it was, no one had run a 4-minute mile until this guy Bannister ran a 4-minute mile. And then right after that happened, it broke the psychological barrier for people, and they realized it was possible. And from that point forward, more and more people every year can run a 4-minute mile.
It's a freaking ChatGPT moment.
It's a ChatGPT kind of moment. And so how do you do it with psionics? Well, you just let people see, you show people other people doing it. And when they see it and they see that it's real, they'll try to do it. And eventually, if you want to get, a Michael Jordan, you've got to get enough people out there playing basketball. And eventually you'll find, you're going to find your talented people. But by making it real for the average person, this is really unique. And this is the first time I understand that this has happened. This is the first one of these, right, coming up?
I find it interesting. They've made it a team sport as well. Like, I wouldn't have thought they'd have done that, but that makes total sense after the conversation we've had tonight when Georg was talking about the sessions he's had with Birdie, where there's 100 people, and it's really about the collective direction of thought rather than the individual, and it's the collective that's far more accurate. So I quite like the idea that it's 5 teams of 5. And also, it's there's 2 divisions, youth and adult, and it's typically adults outperform the youth divisions. But I'm wondering, given all of our knowledge on psionics, whether the youth will actually potentially do just as well as the adult divisions in this case.
We would have to go there and see. You guys should show up and make a podcast from there, live from the PsiGames.
There's a link at the bottom, Xander, for Psi challenges and practice. And is this what they're going to be doing? These are the events? Double blind drawing relay. We'll have to ask Hakeem when we get a chance to talk to him.
It sounds a bit like, these Psi tests from the history of, the remote viewing experiments. There's been many. We had a class at Ubiquity. We went through the history of remote viewing, and this term psi, it's just the letter Y from the Greek alphabet, and he basically I forget the name of the person who invented that term, but he just came up with it because it signified nothing. He just needed a type of a neutral term to name this unknown phenomenon that wouldn't be, magical or too weird. He just used psi. And it's written like this, actually. That's where it comes from.
I wonder how many CIA recruiters will be at the games.
Oh, boy. A lot.
And I wonder, this is probably going to be Spook City. I'll bet you it's going to be spooks holding hands. That it's going to be, in fact, it's probably, I don't want to, I'm sure, I'm just guessing here, but that would be funny if they set it up. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying. I don't know that.
Just the question: is it the white hat spooks or the black hat spooks? That's the question. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, it just seems like something like if you wanted to disclose to everybody and you really wanted to get it out there, but you couldn't just come right out and say it. You'd start to do stuff like this. You'd be like, let's start a PsiGames, and then eventually people just kind of come around to it on their own.
Well, I like that it's public and everybody is invited to participate. Whereas what we had last time at Esalen Institute, where Ross Coulthard was there and Jake Barber and David Grush, it was more like a close kind of elitist event. And they were doing similar things. I don't think they're summoning UFOs yet at the PsiGames. Maybe they do it while having coffee outside later. I don't know. I'm curious to know the connection to ET because Danny's there, Chris Bledsoe is there, and it's kind of difficult not to mention the ET reality at this point.
Well, you have the Soul Foundation bringing together academics from across disciplines into a setting where they can comfortably discuss these really wild topics in a serious way. And then you have the PsiGames where it's sort of like an opportunity for regular people to be exposed to this information, to try it for themselves, to see other people do it, and to slowly start to warm up to this idea. You know, imagine the PsiGames goes on, it's a huge success, and then 10 years later, they've been doing it for a decade, and it's 10 times bigger.
It's
And
on
now
it's on Twitch, it's on YouTube, it's on TV.
international teams of people trying to bend spoons and levitate stuff and move things across the room. I mean, like, you could see it, it would be really amazing to see how it plays out.
That would be finally a sport robots couldn't compete in.
Well, how are we going to defeat the machines in the war for...
You're going full circle here. It took a while, but we're getting there, yeah.
It makes me wonder. It's in today's age, it's relatively easy to put together something like some sort of PsiGames. You could do it within, you know, a couple of months, just so that, you know, it's the fact that it's still a hot topic and it's going to happen. But the fact that they've put it out in August, it's a little way away. So my question would be, is where do you think the psionics landscape is going to be in August? I think it potentially could be a completely different landscape by then.
You know, the thing is, there is a global community of remote viewing practitioners, if you want to say so. I mean, it's not a huge community, but they're serious, they're organized, there are associations in Germany, I'm sure they're in France, they're all over Europe, they are in the US, they're well connected, sometimes to the deep state, sometimes not. And now through the internet, this knowledge is really getting forward, and this is why Birdie has come forth, because she now feels there's a cultural climate where she's allowed to teach this stuff without getting into problems, into trouble. And so I think this is the possibility here.
I mean, for folks that are watching or listening that are new to this, and this, I know how wild all of this seems, and I feel like I just need to take a second to talk to those people. Because it's easy for us, and certainly the three of us, and Xander and me and Pavel, and we'll get together and start like shooting the breeze and stuff. And we talk about crazy stuff like this all the time, and for us it's very normal. But for regular folks, you have to understand that the Central Intelligence Agency declassified something like 80,000 pages of documents. I think it's actually way more than that. In fact, it's a lot. It's in the tens of thousands of pages of classified documents on the Stargate program. You can Google right now, sitting at your computer, Google CIA Stargate program, and it'll come up on their website. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go read it. And when you download the PDF, or you just open the PDF and start looking at it, the first thing you're going to notice is that it's Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff is the guy at the center of the entire UFO conversation. Him and Jacques Vallée, all of this stuff is connected. And not only is it connected, but it's very, very real. And it feels weird to kind of step over that threshold and go, okay, I'm going to be in the world now where this is real. But yeah, it's real. And I think that's the ontological moment where people have to sort of pass through this barrier and get over that hump. But it's hard. I get it. It's hard for some people to do, and I understand why. It's tough when you're looking at your day-to-day life and your day-to-day world, and you're trying to just like get the kids to school and go to work and make a living and pay the bills and figure out what's going to happen next week. Forget about 10 years from now. It's hard to think about all of this stuff and incorporate it into your day-to-day reality, but it is real and it's true, and manifestation does work and meditation does work, and like all of these things are very... It's frightening. It's in a way, it freaks me out sometimes how real it is when I do it in my own life. If I take the time to meditate properly in a disciplined way, and I see the results of that show up in my day-to-day life, it still freaks me out.
This is literally the CIA.gov website. I'm going to post the link in our Discord, and it's a PDF to an approved release. And everybody here knows this, but this, for somebody that hasn't seen this come from an official source, this is from an official source. And literally right here, primary focus of the Stargate effort is an anomalous phenomena to include psychological and related biophysical interactions, telepathy, remote viewing, psychokinesis. and they spent millions on this. It's millions.
And never stopped. They say
The
they
Russians
stopped.
did so too. The Russians were even better at this.
That's the thing, right? Isn't it true? The Russians are better, or were at that time. They were ahead of us by a lot.
Well, I think the reason the US put so much money into it because the Russians did. They knew the Russians were doing it. It's not like the cultural zeitgeist back then was like, oh yeah, we really believe in this. It was more like, oops, the Russians seem to be doing this. We better figure out what they're after here. So, and that's why people like Hal Puthoff got into this, and it is interwoven with the UFO secrecy. And I think the big revelation of this year and what has changed ufology disclosure forever, thanks to Jake Barber, prepared by Greer, of course, but the mainstream breakthrough was Jake Barber, is that this remote viewing conversation, psi conversation, is the same conversation as the ET ufology conversation. It's in fact the same phenomenon. It's the same new chapter of our human story. It's like it doesn't make sense for us to connect to NHI if we don't understand what this human intelligence actually is capable of.
It's hard to even like. It's like you're telling people that there's an entirely omnipresent field that is very real, and every single person can access it, connect to it, feel it, communicate through it. It acts as a medium, and that is the thing we have to really understand before it's going to even be practical to have any kind of back and forth with a non-human intelligence as advanced as what it is that we're dealing with, right? Like that's...
What I understand from these channelers is that the NHI require us to understand that this is the position we're in order to not to be too traumatic in an actual experience of them.
Do you believe that there are, a super weird left field question, are there hybrids walking among us that look just like human beings that are sent here for the purpose of putting this idea, this information out there? Do they walk among us? Are they a part of this process?
I have no idea, man. I have no idea. I can tell you that I had like fun the other day and I Googled starseeds and I went on this page for Arcturian starseeds.
Oh man.
And I'm really not into these websites, this cosmopolitan test. But I was astonished, like, oh my God, this sounds just like me. As if I would be like an Arcturian starseed. And to be honest, would make sense. But then again, does it really matter?
I don't think it matters. I think it's just interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting because the day-to-day existence of the average person is so devoid of any kind of magic or wonder. It's a grind, and it's a lot of just bullshit and being anxious about the future and not it's just all of it. And it's like and we've been in this weird sort of political moment globally that seems to just never end, and it's always so dark. And it would be really nice, I think, to just have a sense of like, oh no, it's a lot deeper than this. It keeps going, and there's way more going on behind the scenes. And I think we kind of intuitively know that, most of us do, but it would be nice to have some kind of, I don't know, something more solid.
It's the ontological relief that Jake Barber is talking about, I think, is one of the lines he will be remembered for among many others. And, we don't necessarily need to have ET contact to have this ontological relief. I think there are also wisdom traditions that enable us to have this. But I think what's unique and what's new about this ET ontological relief is that it really kind of connects all the dots of what we've been going towards as a species with modernity, with our technology, with our understanding of the universe. And it's just coming really full circle. This is this multidimensional disclosure that we're talking about here. Yeah? It's like a civilizational event. Like our generation is here for whatever reason for this civilizational event. And this great a quote by William Gibson, "The future is already here. It's just distributed unequally." Well, we're seeing the nooks and crannies of this future popping up all over the place. It's really hard to ignore.
Yeah.
And that's what's so exciting about it, I believe. It's just about to be tangible.
What happens when humanity invents a machine that is essentially has unlimited intelligence? Do you believe in the idea of the intelligence explosion? And what does NHI do when humanity reaches that moment?
Man, I really don't know. It's really an abstract question. I rather argue from what I know it's true. Because otherwise it feels like a bit like, I don't want to say mental masturbation, but we can go all day long about these things. It's possible. It's not possible. I don't know if we need a new AI paradigm to have real intelligence. We don't even know what it means, right? Where do we draw the line? But the reality of consciousness as being a shared experience, kind of a primordial reality that you can tap into, and it is a spiritual experience, but it is also a tool that you can access with your psi abilities that empowers you. This is a different worldview, and this is real, and this is empowering. It's a new empowering narrative. It's not a religious narrative in the sense of, oh my God, we messed up back in Eden. It's kind of up from Eden, to quote Ken Wilber. It's not all flowers and tree hugging, but it's a positive outlook. It's a bit like the dystopic future, but it's about our personal growth as well, and what we're willing to accept in the, I would say, the paradoxes we're willing to hold.
I see. Are you familiar with this concept, the solar punk science fiction concept? It's the sort of the opposite of cyberpunk. Solar punk is like an optimistic future where technology is used in a holistic way to balance with nature. And
that makes sense.
Pushback against the cyberpunk.
It sounds a bit like Buckminster Fuller's vision.
Yeah, very much so. Like what? Yeah, or like the Venus Project, like the Jacques Fresco idea of a technology eliminating suffering.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right around the corner. We could have another podcast on all the, you could say, over unity inventions, their suppression, and how now people are coming forth, like, Malcolm Bandel with the thunderstorm generator, that prove that physics is more than what we thought it was, and there are other principles we can tap into that make over unity possible. That's a different conversation, but it's part of this disclosure. So we have ancient history, we have AI, we have our psi ability, we have ET reality, and we have this ether physics, free energy over unity stuff, all happening probably in our lifetime. I would be surprised.
And stitched together by advanced robotics providing free labor, essentially unlimited free labor for the cost of energy, which will be next to zero.
Right. And
so it's like, well, what can you do with unlimited free labor? Well, you could build any world you want. So then the question is, like, how do we begin to navigate this how do you ensure that technology is used to solve problems and not create more of them? I guess that's one question. But beyond that, it sounds like what you're saying is that the task now in front of us is, as human beings, to embrace our gifts that are unique to us as consciousnesses, and to become adept in understanding them, take responsibility for them, begin to pursue mastery of them, and in that way become a higher version of what we are. And that will guide us in how to apply the technology as a civilization. Is that fair?
Absolutely. That's very well put. That's kind of my 2 cents on the subject. Yeah. And and I want to make a shout out to all the stuff that's happening at Ubiquity, in case your audience is interested. So
please
Sunday,
go right ahead.
Free event this Sunday, free Zoom webinar of Psionics 2 with Chris Bledsoe, Richard Dolan, and many other psionic assets. All other psionics assets listening are invited to join for free. And then we have a course starting next week with Chris Bledsoe. It's a 4-week course where Jim and I are going to really do a deep dive into his experience. And we have the possibility, you can talk to Chris and have a Q&A with him. And I don't know if you want to look at that website, but like I can tell you, week 1, origins, initial contact, this idea of the lady, the divine feminine, and how that relates, maybe there being angelic beings, and how that's different from NHI or not, right? And then we go also into his NASA involvement, which is really interesting and a bit nebulous. Like, I'm aware that Chris, he seems to be also under NDAs. Like, there's certain stuff he doesn't like to talk about. And we're trying to understand what it is where Chris Bledsoe kind of has an NDA. And it seems to be one.
That's so murky to me. What is that? Why is that so confusing?
Well,
because he talks about it
into NASA to join some special program that deals with this type of stuff.
The same NASA that had a press conference where Bill Nelson was like, we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Yes, the very same one, yeah.
Oh, that was so folksy and just felt so fake.
That's it's a bit like in ChatGPT if you say, explain this to a 3-year-old. And there are all these different versions of reality that are in the same model of, like the model knows it all. It just depends what user is interacting with the model. And it sometimes feels the same way with our media landscape.
Yes. Yeah. It's exactly. Yeah. And I think people suspect that. And what was interesting about the NASA press conference, I couldn't stop thinking this. And I still think, even if I watch it now, I think this. It feels like you can see, like, Bill Nelson's there. Who else is there? A bunch of people. I think Jeremy Corbell was there. Everybody kind of knows this is bullshit. Like, in that moment, everyone already knew. And they were all kind of looking at, even the NASA people kind of knew. They were like, this is silly that but we're going to get up here and we're going to pretend, we're going to do this whole song and dance for you so that it looks like we're having a real moment here. But ultimately, yeah, it's all real. We've known about it. It just seems like we should be past this by now. And it's funny how they drag their feet in this conversation.
Well, as long as we let them, I guess, and
or we take it out of their hands altogether.
Yeah. Or if you stop caring, maybe then they feel like they have to catch up or something. Oh no. So that's the one thing I know, Xander. If you can share the link, I put it in our private chat. If you can put that into the main YouTube comment chat as well. Otherwise, you can just go to ubiquityuniversity.org, go to courses, and their live webinars. It will also show up there. And
so now this is going to be
Sacred Encounters, right?
That's Sacred Encounters, right?
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's
Sacred
start
Encounters
next week.
And is there one is Birdie doing a in-person thing as well?
Birdie's doing a 4-day in-person in Taos, New Mexico with Ubiquity at a very nice retreat center, and it starts Thursday, May 1st, goes up to Sunday, May 4th. Everybody is invited. And there's no prior requirements, and it will be consisting of like learning the ins and outs of remote viewing with her, but also going out to the stars at night and do what you could say contact sessions and then integrating them and see what happens. So that's the other link there.
It's shared, yeah. That's the Taos Stargate, is it not?
Right.
That's it.
That looks so cool. I'm excited to see all of this, and I can't wait to check out Psionics Summit II to dig deeper into this conversation. There's just so much more here, and I feel like this is the beginning of a very, very interesting year.
Lots of stuff we have in the pipeline I can't talk about. I can't say that we're doing a in-person retreat with Chris Bledsoe and Birdie in August.
Really?
Yeah.
Is there a location for that yet?
Will be, I think, where's Chris? North Carolina?
I think he's in North Carolina.
Actually, it will be, and we didn't plan this, right? It is right after Psionic, after the PsiGames.
After the Psi, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, but we didn't plan this. Like, it's basically there's one gap day, and just it's the same state,
Wow.
Carolina. So it's like, wow, that's good. That's a good sign by the universe. We're on the right track here. So
And you said you're going to have Hakeem from the PsiGames is going to be. Where can people find him?
well, he will be there on Sunday to join the panel, the psionics panel,
Okay.
and we'll learn more from him about how this all connects from his perspective. But we have spoken to him, and we are partnering to spread the word, kind of, on both fronts here. And yeah, that's kind of what's up.
Very exciting stuff. Xander, is there anything you wanted to ask or add before we wind it down?
I've always got a million questions.
Go for it, man.
We've only got 5 minutes left.
We'll throw one out there, man.
I guess. And I have to remember, I need to talk a little bit quietly. My daughter's currently sleeping in the room next to me. And maybe just to, we've touched on various points in the last 2 hours related to the dangers of AI, and I've just in the back of my head, I've had sort of a logical thought experiment, very quick experiment to really maybe alleviate some of the potential fears related to AI. But the first question being, do you believe interstellar travel is possible? I think most people here would say yes. And the second question being, do you believe we'd be the first people to ever invent AGI? The likely answer would be no. And we're still here. So the idea that NHI, what do NHI do about AGI? Maybe they don't have to do anything, because evidently, well, not evidently, but reasonably presumably, we're not the first to get this close to AGI. It's reasonable to assume that NHI have gone far further than we have with AI. They're still there. We're still here. The universe is still breathing. So maybe that's something optimistic to finish on, and maybe that's we can explore with a little bit more comfort, knowing that artificial general intelligence, as intelligent as it is, ultimately, with the power of interstellar travel and its the entire universe of a moral landscape to explore, it decides not to destroy the universe. So maybe that's a good thing.
That's always leaving it on such a positive note. I love that. That's what we're about. Good energy.
It's a good point.
It's a great point. I want to do a whole show on AI, and maybe Georg, we can get together and talk about how to do that. But I would love to just
let's invite more people here.
I want to do a panel. It would be great. Okay, gang. I thank you so much, Georg, for carving out the time to come here and talk to us about all of this. I know there's a lot to chew on, but I think we did a good job.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's always great to be with you guys and helping me kind of articulate these things that it's difficult to articulate, and you need to feel kind of safe, and you guys managed to pull that off.
Hey, and I have to tell you that whenever I interact with our audience and people who watch the show, love these conversations. They truly, truly do. And we've got a community of people here that are so excited that we're able to talk about stuff like this and go deep and do these deep dives and really just kind of pick it apart, because it's getting weird out there. And it's going to get weirder. So I'm just glad that we're able to do this. And I want you to know that people really do appreciate it. It means a lot to everybody. So thank you again for coming here. And thanks to everybody for watching at home. Please don't forget to like and share this video. If you want to support us and you want to see more of this, subscribe. And if you're already a subscriber and you want to support us, you can become a member, or you can go to teamnightshift.com and you can pick up some merch. Thanks for watching. We're going to see you again next week. Until then, keep looking up.